I want to give you an overview of what happens when form company opens. So I'm going to show you how the form works by starting my application and going into the Companies menu, Show Companies. It opens up a form with a list view control in it, which has all of the data for the companies that are in my SQL Server database. That's how it works. So let's see how we can make it work in the code that we have. Form Companies is initialized as a form. But let's get an overview of what happens when that form has been initialized. Here's a block diagram which shows you what's happening inside the application as it works. So the form initializes as I said, and then we need a class DB object, and the first thing that class DB object is going to do is get companies. Now the get companies method is going to create a list of companies. In order to do so, it needs class state agency to give it a connection to the database. So it sends the connection to the database here, and class company DB uses that connection to connect to the database and get that list of companies. Now, this list of companies is a list of company objects, and that list of company objects is returned to the GUI, and one at a time is put into the list view control. We're going to look at what the objects do in code. The first one we're going to look at is obviously the company DB class, because the form's initialized and it's going to need this company DB class, as I've just said, in order to retrieve the data from the database. So as I said, what the first thing it does is get a connection to the database. So it uses our static class, the state agency DB, get connection. Now it's going to create an extraction command, which is a select statement from the database, and this is the select statement which says do this from the database. Select company name, company address 1, etc. from company, which is the table name, order by company name. That means sort them out by the company name. Let's look at our database. Here's our columns in our company table, and we want to get the various columns from this table and return them using the company DB class. And we're going to sort them out, order by company name. Go back here, select those things, not everything that's in the table, but the things we've specified, and return them into this. So the SQL command is a new SQL command, and it's going to use this select statement and the connection that we created here in order to do the extraction from the database. Now here's that new bit of code I was going to try and tell you about a little bit in one of my previous videos, the try. Now try is going to have to be explained in the classroom, but what it says, let's have a go, and if it doesn't work, throw an error in this catch statement. And then finally is something that will always happen. So try, catch, finally is a trio of commands that will always work in this sort of situation. Now you don't have to have a finally, but you have to have a try and a catch. So we try this out, and if it doesn't work, we're going to throw an error. That's a thing that I'll explain to you further. So we open our connection, and what we're going to do is we're going to put the data that we find using the select command up here into what's called a SQL reader. And it's going to put rows of data from the company table into our SQL reader. So it executes this command and puts the data into the reader. Now you remember the while statement, which is an iterative method. So it says, while there is stuff to read in my reader, make a new company object and put this data into it for each one of the companies it finds. The reader is closed. So the company list is made up from the objects that are held in the reader. And that's how that piece of code will work. The next stage is to look how this company list, this list of companies, which has been made by our company DB class, is going to be used in the form. Our company class is a holding state for data about companies. Doesn't do anything fancy, this one. Has no methods other than those that get and set the data when it's needed. So our form companies is what started all this. We initialized the component, which is the form, and we loaded it. The form is loaded, and that's one of the events that a form will have, and we choose to use it to get the code to be executed. So object-oriented programming, in fact, concludes quite a lot of event-driven programming styles. So this event, the form companies load, now gets a list of companies and calls it company list. Try catch again. So it says this company list should be made up by completing the get companies method of company.db, which I've just shown you. It then says that if this list is greater than 0, we'll proceed to put whatever's in the list into the list view control on the form. We're going to use another iterative method, which is the for method, and we're going to start at the first record, which is 0, and we're going to run up to as many as there are in the count of the records in the list that's been returned. Now this particular code I'm going to explain to you in a different video, but it just puts into from each one of these records that it finds in the list into the list view control. If it goes wrong, this catch is going to show telling them what sort of error has been found. I don't intend to go through this with every bit of code that we do, but some of it actually needs to be explained in detail. So this particular little video is going to be helping you, I hope, to understand how this process works. So let's just go through the overview again. Here's the overview block diagram again, and you can see the events and maybe relate it now to the code that's been carried out and you've seen demonstrated. Our form is initialized, and in its load event, once it's initialized, we create a company.db class to return a list of companies. This company.db class uses a connection to our SQL Server database and makes up this list of companies, and that list of companies is sent to the list view form of the list view control on the form. Before we move on, I want to just show you something about my estate agency DB class. I work in two different environments, one on my laptop at home and one on my laptop at the college, and it's really easy for me to change the way we access the database with one line of code. There's my college database access, so I should close that down because I'm making this at home, and there's my home one. So that shows you that by changing one line of code, we can change our environment completely. If we didn't work with this estate agency DB class to return our connection, every time I used a connection, I would have to make sure that it fitted the environment in which I was working. Really straightforward.